Yeah, I imagine you have an AI that's like watching CNN and CNBC and Fox News. That's trying to decide whether to bomb North Korea.
Yeah.
Oh my God, right?
In a fast-moving digital world, what does it mean to be a sustainable business? And how does identity empower your business? Join me as I share a glimpse of our life at Spokeo, explore the minds of data industry leaders, and dive deeper into relevant topics in the digital world.
All right, so today we're very, very honored and glad to have William Hsu, my old friend, and also the co-founder and managing director of Mucker Lab here at the Tang Talk. William and I actually share very similar backgrounds. I think we all came from Taiwan, went to the same high school, same college, moved to LA years later. And William, do you mind kind of introduce yourself a little bit to our audience?
Sure. My name is Will Hsu. Harrison is my life doppelganger. That's what I like to call it. We literally have the same background. Although I'm a little bit older than him, so I like to think that Harrison's actually following in my footsteps, literally. I was born in Taiwan, immigrated to the U.S. when I was 10, and then grew up in Saratoga, went to Saratoga High School, go Falcons. And luckily for me and luckily for Harrison, we weren't disowned by our families because we got into Stanford. And then after Stanford, we went into the tech business, and then somehow ended up in LA, and then now both raising families here, and still in the same tech business. So very, very much interesting kind of path. I graduated Stanford in 1998. Famously, that was the middle of the dot-com bubble.
Yep, I remember that.
Right, it's crazier than the crypto times. Like for the kids these days, they can only really think about crypto. So I would like to tell them that .com was even crazier than the crypto. Right, back in those days, if a company adds a .com to their domain name or their company name, right,
Yeah.
and then stock price will go up 10x the next day.
Yeah,
Right.
I remember I have a classmate that got some little money from his parents, and then he was able to buy a BMW like 3 Series, and then right before the crash, because if obviously if he didn't buy the 3 Series, like he would not buy, he would not be able to buy it then.
So I ended up spending about 10 months working in an investment bank, and then left the investment bank being kind of a idealistic and perhaps a little unrealistic kid, starting my first company at 22. We raised like about $15 million in venture capital in 12 months. The entire company was just full of my friends at Stanford. So we're just a bunch of kids running around playing Half-Life. Like the moment 5 o'clock hits, we're like, no more work, Half-Life time. Right.
What does it do, by the way? What's that first startup? I didn't know about that.
Yeah, the company was called BuildPoint. It was, in today's parlance, we'll call it a vertical SaaS company. So we built a suite of software delivered over the website that helped general contractors bid out their job to subcontractors for the commercial construction industry. We were, super crazy, and I was an engineer at Stanford, so I didn't really know that much about business, right? So it was just like, Yahoo's worth a lot of money because they have a lot of eyeballs. So how do we get a lot of eyeballs on our app? So we hired around 300 salespeople across the U.S., put in offices in every single major DMA, and then had our salespeople sell a free product to all the construction software, general construction companies locally. Of course, we got a lot of eyeballs, right? We were using people to sell a product that's for free. Like, there's no concept of CAC, right? What's your customer acquisition cost? Which is like, how many eyeballs do we have? And I think at those times it was kind of like blind leading the blind, right? Jeff Bezos said that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? And my VCs didn't know any better. I didn't know any better. All I did was like spend money to collect eyeballs. I had 0 revenues, and investment banks were asking to take us public. We actually signed an investment bank to actually take us public. Unfortunately, I think 3 months after that was 9/11. So, obviously the market crashed, and then the VCs, had an emergency board meeting. It's like, okay, there's no more free money. We can't raise any more money. How are we going to get to profitability? How are we going to generate revenue? Like, what's your strategy? I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. What?
So the VC the whole time, they're just asking you to grow eyeballs, and that's it. They don't care about anything else.
Yeah, because that's what the public markets was doing, right? Remember at the beginning of the conversation, like a company adds .com to its name and stock price goes up 10x, right? So as a native .com company, all you need to do is have some numbers that look like it's going up to the right, and then you can go public because everybody was just investing in potential, right? Sounds like crypto, right? Right? Let's not worry about revenue. Just worry about, my circulation of my tokens and how popular the token is, right?
Well, in some ways, crypto doesn't even care about eyeballs, right?
yes. Yeah. So rightfully so, I think. After that board meeting, my VCs fired me. So I was unemployed almost immediately. And then they hired a bunch of gray-haired guys from Oracle to kind of turn around the company.
Did you turn around at the end?
They did. So, I don't take any credit for this at all, but the company was eventually sold, I think, in 2013, a long time after that. And to a public company. And for hundreds of millions of dollars, it had like almost $100 million in revenue by then.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. So I give a lot of credit to the people that turned it around. I did not deserve any of that credit. And of course, they washed out all my equity, so I made $0. Like, they didn't even call me when it got acquired.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But how may I ask, like, how did you feel like when that happened? Like, is that the Steve Jobs kind of moment, or like how do you feel, and how do you kind of learn from that experience?
Yeah. There's 7 stages of grief. That's what they say, right? So I remember getting fired in the morning, and then getting so pissed by nighttime that I waited until 1 a.m. I drove my car up to the back office entrance, and then stole an Aeron chair as the memento for BuildPoint. So even today, I still have an Aeron chair at home from BuildPoint. It's my daughter's chair. I think it's past 7 years, so the statute of limitation is gone.
You know your loss.
But I was really angry. But I think with time and age and some kind of self-reflection, entire generation of entrepreneurs did not deserve to be entrepreneurs, including myself. Right? We didn't really understand what it means to generate revenue, how to build an organization, what does culture mean, what does process mean. Right? We just wanted to build and grow and raise money. And there's like 50 other things besides that when it comes to building a business. And we needed to be taught a lesson. And then kind of learn the right way, right? So,
and that's your first job out of college, basically.
Well, I spent 10 months at an investment bank as an investment banking analyst, which also distorted my view of what companies were like, right? Because every company was going public at the time, so I was doing a bunch of IPOs. But yeah, that was my first job, which also meant that after I was hired, it was almost impossible for me to find a job. Right? Like, who wants to hire a 24-year-old ex-CEO of a failed .com startup, right? And you remember at that time, like if people found out that you're a .com CEO, they kind of look at you like you're a fraudster, right? Like, oh my God, you destroyed the economy, kind of thing, right? Yeah. So like there was a website back then called company.com that listed all the failures and had the contact information and phone number of all the CEOs, and like employees who are unhappy will like harass these founders. Right. So it was kind of hilarious at the time.
I remember those days. And actually nowadays, I'm not sure people remember those days, because nowadays people see these failures as badge of honor, right? But back then it actually does carry a little bit of a negative connotation.
Yeah, like how people look at Sam Bankman-Fried or some of these kind of crypto scams in some ways. Certainly there wasn't any fraud, but people still felt like there was a whole generation of entrepreneurs that kind of placed greed over good. And needed to be taught a lesson. And, like if you're an employee and you have, 2 kids and a family to feed, and all of a sudden you're unemployed because the founders had no idea how to make revenue. Yeah, you're kind of pissed. I understand. I'll be pissed today too, right?
So what do you do after that then?
I tried to find a job. I could not find a job because nobody wanted to hire me. So I did what people who are unemployed typically do, which they go to school.
Well, I thought Google likes hiring ex-entrepreneurs as their product managers. Did you look for a job at Google?
I did not. I probably should have. I'll be retired by now. I was too proud to admit that I should just go work at Google. Not that they will hire me. Like I have a lot of friends that work at Google and they've been retired for a very long time, right? Because Google was really started in 99, right? So that was a lot of my classmates, especially some of the best engineers all went to work at Google, right? And obviously it's an amazing company now, but I was just too proud and too stupid to actually understand, right? So I went to business school, went to Philly, studied at Wharton for 2 years, and then came back to the Bay Area in 2005. And even with an MBA, I still couldn't find a job.
I just find it a little bit unbelievable, actually. Maybe your standards are too high or something.
Well, I eventually lowered my standard. I took a job working at eBay as an associate product manager, which is a job they give usually to undergrads. Right, so I was like, I think 29? Yeah, I was 28 to 29, working at eBay, sharing a cubicle with a bunch of like 22, 23-year-olds as an associate PM. I didn't really care about what my title, how much I was getting paid. I cared about observing how a great company is built, right? And eBay at the time was an amazing company. People forget it was 2 to 3 times the valuation of Amazon, right? And bigger than Yahoo and bigger than even Google when Google first went public, right? So he had a group of really amazing people who really experienced at building product, doing marketing, doing sales, right? Kind of you check all the boxes. So I just spent my time at eBay kind of learning from the best. And actually my partner at Mucker Capital was my boss at eBay. He gave me my job, my first job after business school.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's how we met.
And what are the things like that you learn? Maybe it's the lessons, right? Good and bad lessons from eBay. Like, and by the way, yes, eBay at that time is actually bigger than Amazon, right? It's one of the tier 1 tech companies, right? But later on, they obviously got outpaced by Amazon. So what are the lessons you learned from eBay?
You live and die by the sword, right? eBay is and probably still is, or was and probably still is, a very analytical place. They measure everything, they calculate everything, and they make like data and analysis a core part of decision making. So if you have a business model that's working and you're trying to expand and grow and optimize and get better, it's amazing. You can keep that train going and going and going and going. But being completely analytical and making all your decisions based on data and numbers also means that sometimes you miss the mega trends. Right? I remember when Amazon launched AWS, the engineering team at eBay is like, we can totally do this overnight. Why don't we do this? This is so easy. We spend all this time building our infrastructure. Why can't we rent it out to someone else? We should do that too. And the business team was like, show me the business case. We have a $30 billion revenue business. How are you gonna, does this revenue even matter? Right? Like first year you're gonna do 10 million. That doesn't mean anything. Next year you're gonna do what? 100 million? No one cares, right? Like they couldn't get past the numbers and really think about the mega trends of the industry and how to ride the next wave and really innovate and make kind of industry defining platforms rather than simply just how do we make the current business 10, 20, 30% bigger, right? Like I don't think the company learned to take big and kind of leaping forward bets. It was just kind of continually to do the same thing better and faster, rather than really thinking about the future.
No, like I know Amazon folks, right? Because I actually did meet some of them, and they're very analytical, right? And they actually have to write a lot of business case and business documents too. So what's the difference? Like why the same analytical company like Amazon, like eBay, right? Why one of them was able to approve, right, the AWS, such a innovative venture, whereas the other one missed the boat?
A single guy, Jeff Bezos.
Oh,
right. Like by the time I was at eBay, Pierre Media, who started eBay, was already gone. Right. The guy who was innovative and entrepreneurial and really changed how goods are transacted over the internet was gone. Right. And it was a suite of professional managers, including myself, right, that was running the business. And our goal was to keep the train running. Right? Rather, like if we wanted to be entrepreneurs, we would go quit and start a new company. But if we're at eBay, our job was to keep this train running, right? But Jeff Bezos was like, well, I used to be a hedge fund manager, and now I started Amazon. And Amazon used to sell books, and now it sells cosmetics. So like, if I want to do AWS, why wouldn't I do it? Like a single decision maker. And the, founder-driven companies, the founder has absolute decision-making power, right? Yes. Harrison, you know this, right?
Yes.
If Harrison tomorrow decides he wants to change the company from Spokeo to Blue.com, he can do it, right? He doesn't need to go through a marketing committee or get his board to approve it and have the executive team to buy in, right? There's just too many people in a professional run company that could say no. And honestly, just like any startup, any new business line, any new idea, the most likely outcome is failure. But that's not the point, right? It's about the expected value of the outcome, not the probability of success. If you can win, and winning means $1 trillion, even 0.1% chance of winning is pretty good, right? Because the expected value is very high, right? I think professional managers kind of can't see the big outcome because only entrepreneurs can, right?
Yeah. Good point. So what do you do after eBay then? Yeah.
I made this promise to myself that the next time I start a company, I would actually know what to do rather than winging it and spending all my time playing Half-Life. So I decided I want to spend the next 10 years kind of working in corporate and climbing the corporate ladder and learn how to build a company, build a product from 2 guys in the garage to 50 people to 1,000 people to $1 billion revenue, right? Like the entire scope of like building a startup, right? Because at the time, and I think this is probably a good thing, where the heroes of our generations are people like Michael Dell and Bill Gates, who started companies, then stayed 10 years or 20 years or 30 years and built that business forever, right? Into a global colossus, right? Not guys who raised $1 billion and then did a secondary and sold $100 million of worth and then retired and then went to the Bahamas while their company's not even public yet.
Yep.
Right? Like the new generation entrepreneurs want to monetize really early and high five each other and win and, go to conferences and then be more successful than their company. Right? Back then, my heroes were people that live and died with their companies. And if they lived, then they lived with it forever, right? So I thought, you know what? I want to be that. I want to be a Gates or a Dell. So that means I really have to learn not just, how to raise $50 million in venture capital, but actually how to generate $1 billion in revenue, right? So I did the corporate ladder thing, and eventually ended up here in LA, working for AT&T in a division called AT&T Interactive, where I acted as a executive VP and chief product officer for a division.
What's your responsibilities there, and then what did you learn from this journey, climbing the corporate ladder? Yeah.
What was the journey like? Let me think. So, the AT&T at the time was really a data transport business, right? It's like a layer 1 business, right? And for a long time, layer 1 innovation was key, right? Because the data and the pipes to enable the internet to happen was not quite yet built. And anyone who can build a better pipe wins, and AT&T was doing that, especially on the mobile and the cellular side, right?
Mm.
However, as the infrastructure mature, innovation now can be enabled at the application layer, right? So companies like Yahoo and Google and AOL at the time was making a lot of money being an application provider sitting on top of these pipes. And AT&T wondered if there was an opportunity for them to kind of capture some of that value and generate revenue. Yep. So they put some of their application revenue related companies into a single entity. There was its iPhone. So AT&T at the time was working with Apple to launch the iPhone.
Yep.
So they wanted to see how they can monetize that relationship, right? So like, okay, go figure out, besides selling phones and plans, what else can we do to make money from the iPhone, right? They had an advertising business that was a legacy of its partnership with Yahoo called Yahoo SBC, which is the ISP business with the portal, right? So they have revenue coming from the portal. And then they had a IPTV business called Uverse at the time that had inventory advertising, IP-based advertising inventory that they were selling. And then lastly, which was actually the most interesting part to me, was it's at the time when I joined AT&T, they still had about, I want to say $6 or $5 billion in print advertising revenue coming from its Yellow Pages business. Right, like SBC, unlike other Baby Bell, right, never sold its print Yellow Pages business. They kept using it as a cash cow to build out its mobile network, and obviously everything was going online. So they were wondering, what was their strategy to turn that revenue, who's going away, into a web-based business and a mobile-based business.
And by the way, these businesses are all so different, right? So you're the chief product officer. Like, how do you actually kind of manage so many different businesses?
We really looked at it all as advertising.
I see.
Yeah, so we picked a single monetization model, right, across all these inventory that's available to us with all these channels, and we view them as, here's search, here's display, right? Here's data, here is a DSP, right? How do we monetize this in the context of the entire ecosystem around kind of mobile advertising and online advertising outside of the captives like Google and Facebook, right? So really, AT&T Interactive was an advertising company.
I see. And then, like, how do you kind of manage such a big team, right? Because like before, when you run your own startup, that's one challenge, but AT&T probably have thousands of people, right? So what are the different challenges there? Yeah.
I can't say that I'm a great manager still, but I know at least what the challenges are, right? I think the first thing you do is hire people smarter than you, right? And if all 7 direct reports are smarter than you, that works for you, are smarter than you and better than you, you have a lot less problems, right? And if everybody does that 1, 2, 3, 4 levels down, you have an organization that I call it kind of self-healing, right? Like people will do the right thing because they're smart. And what you have to do is set goals, and what you have to do is set culture, right? And I do think as any company gets bigger and bigger, the role of the CEO changes, right? It's you're kind of like the guy with the loudspeaker, and you're repeating the same thing over and over and over again because that's important, right? Like it's the strategy, the culture, the behaviors, the goals, the vision, the mission, right? These are the things that people need to hear more than once to understand, and the people need to hear more than 3 times to emphasize, right? And then they need to hear 5 times so that they can actually repeat it to someone else, right? So I learned that to be a good leader, you actually kind of have to be an actor. Like you have to get yourself out there, and then you have to like say the same thing over and over again, and kind of be the person that spreads the message, like almost like an evangelist. Yeah.
And you know, I know a lot of people feel a little bit uncomfortable hiring people smarter or better than them because they fear their job will be taken, right? So how do you feel at peace, right? With hiring so many more smarter people than you that who can actually replace you.
I promised everyone that I will not be at that job for more than 4 years, and soon enough, my job will be theirs.
I see. Got it. Yeah, because that's why I told like my direct reports, I would like them to actually hire people better than them, and in return, I will promise that I will not find a replacement. That's how I dealt with it, because I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable about that. Yeah,
I think that's a important transition as we get older, to kind of let go of our ego.
Yes,
right, and understand that if all the people that work for you are smarter than you, you're probably looking pretty good to the boss man.
Yep. So what's after that? What's after AT&T Interactive?
So this was 2011. I've been at a company for like 4 years now, and I think I'm trying to figure out maybe like 35, 36, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still
very young, by the way.
Still very young. Oh, no, so, thank you so much. Yeah, still very young, and especially very young in the context of AT&T. Yeah. Right? These are very senior executives who've been there for a long time.
By the way, sorry to interject, but why would they hire such a young person to be the chief product officer, right? Because in big corporations, usually their senior executives like more than 40-year-old or 50. Right?
Yeah. I think I give AT&T a ton of credit. They saw that the talent they have was trained internally, right? So they knew the telecom business really well. But this was an entire new business, and they needed talent who are native to the internet to run it. But the CEO of my division was from AT&T, and he provided the context and the political kind of cover for us, because we don't know anyone from AT&T, and then we were able to be left alone and execute towards our vision. So I actually give AT&T a ton of credit for understanding how to innovate, right, and how to create organizations outside the core organization that could potentially cannibalize their own business.
Oh, so it is intentional.
It was intentional. I think it was very smart.
Cool.
And AT&T's main office is in Dallas, and they headquartered us in LA so that we actually have some distance from corporate.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what's after that?
So I was 35, 4 years at AT&T, and thinking about what's next, because this can't be it, right? Like another 10 years, like get pension, what's the point, right? So I quit AT&T actually to start my own company. I was like, all right, I'm finally ready to be an entrepreneur again. I am not a faker anymore. I actually know how to build shit, right? So I quit. I was gonna go start a company. And I caught up with my old boss from eBay, Mr. Eric Warnala, and he told me he's starting a venture capital fund. So I went corporate after eBay, and he went venture. So he was doing venture in the Bay Area for a little bit, and say, I'm moving to LA, you're in LA, I want to start a venture fund, a seed fund. Seed fund is a brand new, unique category that was really started in the Bay Area around 2007, 2008, along with kind of Y Combinator, right? And there was a whole generation of seed fund that's doing really, really well. LA needs a seed fund. It's an ecosystem that does not have a seed fund, because seed funds takes the earliest risks and invest in young entrepreneurs who might or might not have experience in the past and help them build their business, right? And especially in an ecosystem like LA, who maybe 12 years ago was super early. There wasn't a Google office, or the Google office wasn't that big. There wasn't a ton of Stanford kids running around who already know how to start a company, right? Like you actually really do need, venture funds actually knows how to do this, right? So, and the pitch that worked on me was, instead of thinking that we're becoming VCs, and you will become a VC, and I didn't want to be a VC, like we are starting a company whose market happened to be in venture capital.
That's a good pitch.
Rather than worry about what the market is in, right? Like we are actually starting a firm, and we are being entrepreneurs. We're just entrepreneurial VCs, right? Not that VCs who are thinks like an entrepreneur, but literally we're entrepreneurs who were starting a venture capital fund.
That pitch reminds me of a Netflix story, right? It's like they said it's a data company instead of a DVD or movie. Yes,
Mailing DVDs, no fun. Yeah. So Eric convinced me to start Mucker with him, and ironically, we couldn't raise a lot of money. Like, turns out no one wants to invest in a fund based in LA because LA funds has never made money historically. And of course, it's not like we have like history of like, you know, like the angel investing in some of the largest companies in the world. Like, we're just two guys who thought it would be a good idea, right? Like, we were a little bit of a novice, right? So it was super hard to raise money. So our first fund was only $1 million, some friends and family and our own money. And you can't invest as a venture fund with only $1 million. So you can write one check, maybe two checks at most, right? And then you're done. And then what's next, right? So
I thought Y Combinator, the check size is like 50K or 10,000 at that time, right?
20K for 7% at that time.
Well, yeah, so you can, with 1 million, you can write a lot of checks.
That's exactly what my partner said. So instead of starting a venture fund, we're going to call ourselves an accelerator, right? And then all of a sudden we're like, well, we're just like Y Combinator. Y Combinator's not in LA, they're only in San Francisco, right? Or actually at that time, Mountain View, right? And especially at that time, Y Combinator was very localized to the Bay Area, right? They was doing maybe like 20 companies, 30 companies a class. So like, there wasn't really a threat outside of the Bay Area. So we thought we can be the Y Combinator of LA with $1 million. We can write enough $20,000 checks and not run out for a few years. So we decided to, you know, start an accelerator instead and call ourselves Mucker Lab. And that was the first incarnation of Mucker.
By the way, why is it called Mucker? I always want to ask you that question.
My partner Eric is a history nut. He really liked the history of technology, and Mucker is actually a Thomas Edison term. So famously, right, Tesla. It was in his basement, single guy in the dark doing crazy stuff, and then he eventually lost his mind, right?
Yeah.
And then Thomas Edison did exactly the opposite. He's the Andy Warhol of entrepreneurship, right, or inventors, right? He spent most of the time talking to the press and marketing and getting interviewed, and hired a bunch of young college grads to do the experiments for him. And his view on innovation isn't, you know, how do I mathematically or looking at the molecules to come up with the right compound? He's like, we're just going to try, right? So one of the things he did, well, famously was, you know, he tried 1,000 filaments for the light bulb and found the best one, right? He didn't really go figure out which one should he try first. He's like, we're just going to brute force it, right? So his entire philosophy was more about repeatability, right? And that's why he always said, right, like perspiration always beats inspiration. Right, and we believe in that ethos. So the people that worked for Thomas Edison, because Thomas Edison was such an asshole,
I know,
right? Started their own union to provide kind of negotiating leverage against him, as well as provide an alumni network if they ever quit working for Thomas Edison. And they called that union the Fraternity of the Muckers.
Oh.
And they were called the Muckers because one of the things that they were working on at the time was a better formulation for bricks. So all these young, handsome men were working in the mud with like very little clothes on because they didn't want to get dirty. And then the press saw these guys and started taking pictures, and they started calling these young kids Thomas Edison's Muckers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
I never know the name is that deep.
Yeah. So Mucker is a homage and a reference to Thomas Edison's ethos, right, around hard work, repetition, experimentation, and process, rather than inspiration and origination and kind of like luck, right? And then also against Thomas Edison, because we think the true heroes of this kind of revolution is not Thomas Edison. It's the people that work for Thomas Edison. They were actually the ones doing the work.
Oh, amazing story, actually. Yeah. So is the culture the same as you described, like persistence and yeah?
Yeah. I think, especially looking back at my career, it's not about how many failures you have. It's about how many times you try. And as long as you have one winner, everything will work itself out, right? It's about the number of at-bats. And that's true for entrepreneurship itself. We tell entrepreneurs, it's not about whether you fail today or tomorrow. It's about coming back and failing more the next day, right? And then it's also about the company itself. If you're starting a company, you're experimenting, you're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, right? Don't spend too much time thinking about what you're going to do. Just go try it, just go do it. The data will tell you what's working or what's not. And then you're always kind of taking a step forward, whether you're failing or you're winning, you're learning about what to do and what not to do. And if you can take those little success and have them one a day, right? Over the course of a year, you can have 253 successes. Over the course of 3 years, you're going to have, almost 300, whatever, like 750, right? And if you can succeed a little every day, and it takes 10 years to build an amazing business, right? And most businesses take 10 years. You're going to build a pretty amazing business because that's a lot of success, right? That's like...
Yep. Kind of like baseball games. It's not win by home runs. It's actually singles and doubles.
Yeah.
Right?
I love baseball.
Yeah.
I'm an Oakland A's fan.
Wait, really?
I am.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Giants or something.
My doppelganger, right?
I like the poor teams.
Yeah,
but
they're moving. Did you see that yesterday? They're moving?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, go read. They're moving to Las Vegas. It's very sad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it's really sad. So, but, Pete Rose doesn't have the highest batting average at all. Not even close. Like on the list of top batting averages, like Pete Rose is like, I think in the thousands ranking wise. But he's the all-time hits leader.
Yes.
Right? And that's because he has more bats than anyone else and he played longer. Right? And that's how you win in entrepreneurship. Get more bats and play longer.
So in this journey, like how do you grow from like 1 million to like nowadays like top 3 like accelerator in the world basically? Yeah.
One company at a time, there wasn't this like strategic plan to take over the world. Like I don't have that kind of ambition. Sounds like a lot of stress. It's our focus on the entrepreneurs and making sure every entrepreneur has an amazing experience working with us and feels like we gave our own all and they were able to give their all because of our help, right? And if you're able to stack up these little success over time, something will work out, right? Even it took us 3 years to raise our second fund. Even that was $12 million. That's fund 2. And if you know the math in the VC world, you get paid 2% annually, right? So 2% on $12 million, that's, $240K between 2 guys in office space and, all these expenses. Yeah, we're not paying ourselves anything, right? So, and then another 2 years, so 5 years to finally get to our $45 million fund, still tiny. I think in 2017, which wasn't that long ago, especially if you minus the COVID years, Mucker was still Eric and I, right? But
running the whole show.
Running the whole show because we
Really?
didn't have enough fees to go hire anyone, right? But we started getting exits and having kind of major VCs invest in our portfolio companies. And certainly rising tide raises all boats, so I don't want to think it's all me or all Eric. LA was growing like crazy. The ecosystem here, tech was taking over the world. So we were at the right place at the right time. But we started getting exits, and in 2019, all of a sudden we were put on the map because one of our biggest companies got acquired by PayPal for
$4 billion.
$4 billion.
Right?
Yeah. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, I never heard of Mucker. Overnight success. Like, how did you guys become such an overnight sensation? And it was like, we've been doing it for 7 years.
So is there some kind of quality you look for in founders, and what are those qualities? And also, most importantly, how do you assess those qualities in a 1 hour or 2 hour conversation?
Yeah, we look for entrepreneurs who have domain experience in the problem they're trying to solve. we look for entrepreneurs that have a unique perspective, like a thesis, right, about the problem they're trying to solve. Everybody look at the world this way, right? Everybody thinks that's just blue. That is not blue. That's Dodger blue, right? Like someone that really see the world slightly different than everyone else, and then therefore the problem's not this, it's this, and therefore I'm going to build this and not this, right? And I think that's really important because that makes the product, the positioning, the strategy of the company unique, and therefore they're not competing in the same way as their competitors, right? Like, if you love Oakland A's, right? Like, you want to be like Ricky Henderson, you don't want to be like Jose Canseco, right? Like, more and more steroids to hit longer and longer home runs. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, but like, are you gonna make the Hall of Fame that way? Right? Like, but then Ricky Henderson, my God, like, you can score on the first inning without a hit, because a walk and 2 stolen bases and then a ground out, 1 point, right? Like we were looking for the Ricky Henderson of the world, right? And then the other thing, which is related to kind of the Mucker ethos, is we look for entrepreneurs that don't quit, that have a very, very low burn, and have a team that can go build a product and iterate without burning through lots of cash, right? Like, now entrepreneurs would say, okay, now I quit my big company job, I'm gonna start a company, I'm gonna pay myself $150K, and then my co-founder needs $180K because he was getting paid $250K at Facebook. So therefore, I need to raise $2 million to pay ourselves a market salary, right? Like, you're only 2 people in, and you already have expense of $400,000 a year, right? Like, that gives you a counting clock on when the company will fail. Like, click, 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 you run out of money, you're done, right? But you have 2 founders that's like, oh, I'm gonna live at the office. Not that we encourage that, right? Or I've saved up some money. The company is the only expense the company has is AWS, and AWS is super cheap. So I'm burning like $5,000 a month, right? Then, like, can we find a way to get to $5,000 or even $10,000 a month in revenue in the next 12 or 18 months we're working with you? I'm pretty confident we can figure that out, right? And then after you figure that out, then you can take all the money we invested in you, not to sustain and experiment, but actually in growth. Okay, you figured out how to generate revenue. You got a little bit of product market fit. You know what your customer look like, how to price it, how to talk about a product to make them excited, and how to get them to sign on the dotted line. Let's spend every dollar we have in replicating the same thing over and over again, so we can take 5,000 to 50,000, 50,000 to 100,000, and then we go raise money, right? People are, I guess, surprised and sometimes appalled at how lean we make our companies behave. Like,
do other VCs also do that too, or mostly Mucker?
It's not like I ever worked at other venture capital firms, so it's not like I really know. I do know that, we're in LA, especially 11, 12 years ago, there isn't a lot of venture capital firms, right? So if they get a check from Mucker, they should just expect that's the only check they get. There's no point trying to find more, right? Like, there's just so few firms. Like, there was like 5 firms back in the day, right? Yeah. Like, you get 1 out of 5, you're like really good, right? If you want to get 3 or 4 out of 5, the probability is pretty low that everybody will like what you're doing. So just like you kind of have to build a company this way here in LA. And I do think other firms care much more about growth and velocity, right? So that they can figure out the outcome as soon as possible. Is it the right bet? Is it not the right bet? Nobody wants to bet on black and have to come back 2 weeks later to the same casino and find out if they won or not, right? People kind of want to, I place it on black, they spin it, I lost, I won within 5 seconds, right? Our ethos is more like, I don't want you to spend any money until we know we have product market fit. Oh, okay, now that we have product market fit, we can now spend money.
And how do you, because a lot of these business startups are in different businesses, right? Like earlier you said that you want to kind of find the person with a unique angle, but how do you know it's unique, right? Like, do you read up a lot of books to get you familiar with all these domains, like, or do you have a sixth sense to know to call a bullshit, right? A BS, right? Yeah.
Yes, we're wrong all the time. That's for sure. Oh my God. Thank God in our business, if you're right 1 out of 20 times, people think you're a genius, right? Yes, I do read a lot. I try to understand as much as I can about any industry and how other companies have succeeded, right? Like every time I meet a new entrepreneur, I try to find, oh, you used to work at Uber in LA 15 years ago. What did Uber do in LA to become so successful? And then I listen and I learn and I make a mental note. Oh, like they went out and leased their own cars. So the first 50 drivers were not actually Uber drivers. They were actually company employees, right?
How do you know that?
Right? Like stuff like that, right? And that gives me data point to compare. And then also I think this is why some of the best VCs remain best VCs in the world is that they see a lot of deals and talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. And therefore they can get a sense of what everyone else thinks and how everyone is trying to compete with each other, right? Like if you're a VC and you want to invest in a people search site, right? The way you do it is, especially on later stage VCs, you talk to the 5 companies in the space and grill them about their strategy and their thesis and how they compete and how their product is different. And then you pick one where I believe that founder more than other founders, right? Or you take all these views and then you combine them and come up with a slightly reconfigured version of what you think is the truth, right? And, like VCs are really great at aggregating data and process it. I don't think VCs are that good at coming up with original ideas, but luckily for them, lots of people want to talk to them, so they luckily are able to have good ideas, right? Like I think half of the stuff I say is like I heard from some entrepreneurs like 5 years ago. It's like, oh, that sounds really good. I want to copy that next time.
Well, if this is the case, then AI can probably replace VCs, right? Because if VC just aggregates and organizes and analyzes data, if that's the best competency, then AI will probably...
Yes, the problem with that is the data around how VCs make decisions is not on the web or crawlable, right? But absolutely, like if like you put a bug in the Sequoia office, right, and then like listen to all the decisions that they're making, and then analyze the conversations, analyze the data, the decks that the entrepreneurs are giving them, I bet you can build an AI that can compete with Sequoia. That's the next business Harrison and I will be starting. Put a bug in Sequoia's office.
Yeah, I mean, with voice recognitions and all these like new technology, large language models, you can probably do that, right?
Yeah, it's really the lack of data rather than the lack of a model.
Yeah. So how does like Mucker today kind of compete against other VCs or accelerators? Because back in the day, like let's say 10 years ago, yes, geography is a big differentiating factor, right? It's there's not that many VCs or accelerators in LA, but nowadays like everything is kind of post-pandemic, like everything is kind of remote, flexible, or it can go anywhere in the world, right? That concept of parameter is no longer around. So how do you kind of compete?
We now have offices. So 5 years ago it was still just in LA. Today we have offices in LA, Austin, Nashville, Chicago, and Toronto, and we have more. So we are one of the very few C-stage venture funds that actually have offices outside of their core geography. In fact, we probably have the most offices of any seed fund in the US. And therefore, we have local coverage into the local areas and behave like a local firm. The other thing that we do is, barrier firms are much bigger than us and have much higher kind of investment criteria, right? Because they're looking at a bunch of deals coming from Stanford grads. And, like it's at least the Stanford grads can talk the same language as the VCs, right? So it's easier to make an investment in someone from Stanford, right? Or grew up in Saratoga, right? Than someone that grew up somewhere else. So we don't have those biases. We has trained our AI, our judgment on talking to entrepreneurs who did not go to Stanford, who did not work 2 years at Google, who did not grow up reading, TechCrunch and Red Herring or Business Insider, right? So we understand what is truly a problem versus what is simply a jargon issue, right? And then we have structured the firm to provide so much help to entrepreneurs that like we can help them with their strategy, their execution, their skill set, and their knowledge, so that if there are holes on the team or hole in the knowledge of the entrepreneur, we can be the augmentation and help them get to the other side. So we take more risk than most venture fund would in the Bay Area, because oftentimes the deal that we see, they wouldn't be interested until they have a lot of revenue. Right. And of course, we'll work with the entrepreneurs, get our company to a lot of revenue, and then bring it back to the Bay Area VCs who are our partners and kind of pitch them for an investment. The other thing that is interesting to me is, I think 2021, like the tail end of the pandemic, it is true. Lots of VCs just investing in everywhere. Right. And, I'm just going to be on Zoom and write checks. Right. That cohort of company in 2021, for various reasons, including the fact the valuation was crazy, is probably one of the worst cohorts in venture history.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
You talk to almost every VC, they almost regret most of the deals they've done in 21. So some of the best VCs have kind of retrenched from this kind of like locationless investment thesis and have back to kind of investing in their core geographies. And then with the market being bad for tech, right, the hurdle for Series A has gone up, right? So a lot of these firms don't want to invest in seed stage companies in New Orleans. Why, when you can invest in seed stage companies in Palo Alto, right? Yeah. So in some ways, this 2023 feels actually more like 2018 to me, where Mucker's back to being kind of a fund that invests as early as possible in stages that most kind of national VCs wouldn't touch, and invest a ton of resources and a lot of time. And then maybe a year or even 2 years later, when the company's finally ready, they can then go to the Bay Area and raise money, right? That's always been our thesis. In 2021, it started getting kind of a little murky on what everyone else is doing, but now it's kind of back. So with the tech ecosystem not being as robust as it was 2-3 years ago, we actually feel very comfortable with our competitive advantage, which is taking risks and then investing our time and energy to mitigate those risks and then build better companies with our entrepreneurs.
Are there any markets or kind of tech trends that you're most interested in? Or like, is it just like generative AI is obviously on top of everyone's mind? Or are you interested in that, or you're like, that's overly crowded? So.
I wish I can afford to invest in those companies. Yes, like valuations are way down across every single industry in tech except for generative AI. This, like in generative AI, you can still be like pre-launch and get 100 million pre. Like all the crypto money has moved to generative AI.
At least I think the generative AI has merits. The crypto money, I'm not so sure. We are a small fund. Those deals you generally cannot afford, but it is a trend that is super important, right? I do believe that every enterprise software companies will need to have some sort of AI component to their technology to continue to drive efficiencies in their customers' operations, right? Instead of just workflow and data integration, now you got to help people make better decisions and actually help them do the output, the work, the generative part of this. So I do think this is one trend that's not going to go away versus the cryptos, the drones, the ARs, the VRs, right? Like, how many of this have we seen in the last 10 years between you and I, right? And in the end, most of it just kind of fizzled away, right? I don't think this will fizzle away. I do think it will be hard to figure out how to truly make money in AI by itself. I do think there's going to be a handful of large language model companies that's going to aggregate most of the value of the industry, right, including OpenAI. And that the opportunity to create applications on top
will be just as competitive as it ever was, because it's easy to actually leverage one of these models to add to whatever you were already doing before.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe this game around generative AI is really reserved for the biggest firms out there, the Sequoias and the Andreessens of the world, where they can take bets on some of these kind of model companies that are trying to build a platform. And, maybe out of 100 that gets funded, 5 will win. And that's okay.
Yeah. I'm curious, because on this topic of generative AI, some people think generative AI is just like a much more sophisticated or like autocomplete on steroid, basically, right? That's on one end. And the other end thinks that the AI is sentient. I don't believe that it's sentient, but some people actually believe that could be true. And, AGI, artificial general intelligence, can happen in the next 5 years. So in this spectrum, where are you? Yeah.
Both, right? I'm kind of a cop-out. Simple implementation of AI is really just make the output easier for a person, right? And that output, I think it's more than just text. It could be text, it could be video, it could be images, it could be audio, right? It could be presentations, whatever it is, right? I think generative AI has great powers to help us do our job better. When I think about how much we hate formatting on PowerPoint, that's an easy generative AI job.
Yeah. Actually, we use a tool that leverage generative AI to give a lot of frames on our ads. So we feed a picture, and then you'll just add a bunch of things, and you give it 1,000 variations, and then you can just let it's crazy.
So I think there's definitely value added, that obviously, like create better ads and better performance, right? That's direct economic benefit to everybody in the ecosystem. Is that transformative? Probably not, right? But it's great for the economy if every worker is 10% more efficient. Right? That's a reduction of 10% in inflation, right? Which is great for the economy, right? Now, does these large language models could eventually become Skynet? If we hook it up to the right things or the bad things, then absolutely, right? These generative AI are capable of making decisions. And if you trust it to make the decisions and you hook it up to the nuclear button, instead of needing the president to hit the button, now it's some algorithm that's crawling the web, answering random questions, and you have no control over the input and how it's processing the output. And then all of a sudden it's making these type of decisions. For sure, really, really bad things can happen, right? So I do think we have to be careful about what we're hooking up these things to and making sure that there's always people in the middle.
True. Well, on that topic, at the very least, the labels in supervised learning, the labels on nuclear button, no one has said yes to nuclear bomb yet, right? So that's at least provides some comfort, I would say.
Yeah, imagine you have an AI that's watching CNN and CNBC and Fox News. That's trying to decide whether to bomb North Korea. Yeah. Oh my God, right?
That's crazy. So other than AI, other trends that you're excited about?
I found that the most successful investments that we ever made had never really been about trends. It's always been about discovering a problem that's deep, that's hard to solve, not a lot of people know about it, and then building something simple yet innovative to solve that problem, right? And then, getting a lot of people to use it, right? It's never something that requires innovation upon innovation upon innovation upon innovation, right? It's always been a very simple problem, well, a hard problem with a simple solution that's pretty unique. So I try not to get too caught up on all the trends. I try to listen very carefully to what the entrepreneurs are saying, and if he or she actually have a background in the topic, that's when you make sure you pay attention and be like, oh, is that really true? Interesting. Tell me more, right? And I think that's what you learn rather than try to learn from reading TechCrunch. Yeah.
So what's the like the best kind of wisdom that you heard recently that you can share with our audience?
A lot of people ask me whether this is the right time to start a company. You know, like the market's bad, lots of people are getting fired, blah, blah, blah. And then people have time now. Like they might not be working that much, or unfortunately they no longer have a job. And like, should I be starting a company? And my answer to them is there's no best time and no worst time to start a company. It's not about timing your startup. It takes 10 to 15 years to build a great company. You can't time anything in 10 that has a life of 10 to 15 years, right? Like whether you started this year or 3 years from now, it's still 10 years to 15 years, right? So much more important is what's the problem you're solving? Is that a real problem, right? And do you know something about it that no one else does? And can you get the dog to eat the dog food? In a good economy and in a bad economy, if you have untasty dog food, the dog still won't eat it. Doesn't matter what kind of economy it is. Right? The economy only impacts your valuation. And if you're starting a company to maximize valuation, you shouldn't be starting a company anyway.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you, William, for sharing so much wisdom. Like, do you have any last words or lessons that you want to share with our audience?
Not really. Listen to Harrison every Wednesday night at 7.
Thanks for setting our new schedule for the podcast. But if anyone wants to kind of find you, like how do they reach out to you?
Yeah, Mucker has always had an open door policy the moment we launched, partially because we didn't have any rich or famous friends, and therefore we didn't get much deal flow. So we always put our email on our website, and that's been the case since day one. So my email is william@muckercapital.com. And if you forget, check out the website and you'll see my email there. And we try very hard to answer every rational email. Don't just say, hi, bye. I'm not going to answer that. But if you're
that
right,
might be written by ChatGPT, by the way.
the 10 paragraph ones are probably ChatGPT.
That's true. Thank you. Well, thank you, William. Thanks a lot.
No, thanks,
a lot
Harrison.
for dropping by. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.